People usually believe they think logically. But Dale Carnegie says, people do not move based on logic. They only begin to change when their emotions stir. People are moved not by logic, but by emotion. A speaker went on stage. He did not ask the audience any questions, nor did he explain any complex logic. Instead, he said this: "When I was young, I was never praised. Whatever I did was inadequate, and I was scolded no matter what I did. But one day, my teacher looked at me and said this: 'You really have perseverance.' That single remark changed my life." When he finished speaking, the audience was already captivated by his story. People believe they move in a logical manner. But in reality, it is emotion that reacts first. Those who are good at persuasion know how to move a person's heart rather than their head. People feel emotions first, and then justify them with logic. People believe they make logical judgments when they choose something. But in reality, emotion acts first. If someone bought a luxury car, they would cite performance and safety as reasons. But is that really why? And if that car were from a brand that didn't catch people's attention, would they have made the same choice in the end? People use logic to rationalize the decisions they already made. Emotion decides first, and logic only justifies it. 90% of persuasion is about reading what the other person wants. A child whines for a toy to be bought. The parent firmly says no, but the child does not stop. They cry louder and even throw themselves on the floor. In the end, the parent sighs and buys the toy. The important point in this situation is why the child got what they wanted. It was not simply because they yelled, but because they instinctively knew when the parent would be at their weakest, and they used that timing. People put forth logic to get what they want. But in reality, they must first figure out what the other person wants and what state of mind they are in. Dale Carnegie said, "People do not move based on logic. They move only when you show them what they want." People want to hear words that satisfy their desires. When we try to persuade someone, we often make the mistake of speaking from our own point of view. This product is made with the best technology. This method is the most effective approach. But as they hear these words, the other person thinks to themselves, "So how does that help me?" People are very interested in themselves. If you want to persuade someone, you must first read their interests. Let's suppose a person goes to buy a car. The salesperson says this: "This car has great fuel efficiency, and the engine performance is excellent." That may be true, but it does not leave a strong impression on the customer. However, if they say this instead: "If you choose this car, you can reduce your fuel costs if you drive long distances. Good fuel efficiency can save you a lot of money in the long run." Now the customer hears information connected to their own reality. From that moment on, they begin to pay attention. Persuasion is difficult because people focus on their own logic and thoughts, rather than on the other person. However, if you first read what the other person desires, you can persuade them naturally without unnecessary arguments. Do not argue, but use their interests. Most people try to persuade others by asserting their own opinions. But winning an argument does not necessarily change the other person's mind. What if someone said this to you? "The way you're doing it now is wrong. You have to do it like this." There are not many people who would take this comment pleasantly. But it is different if you change your approach. That method is good too. But if you do it this way, you can get the desired results more easily. Even if you're conveying the same information, expressing it from the other person's perspective makes it much more smoothly received. Dale Carnegie said, "Do not say what the other person does not want to hear. Say what they want to hear." Identifying what the other person wants is the core of persuasion. People open their hearts to those who consider them important. When you talk with someone, simply calling them by their name often changes the emotional tone. When you call someone by name, they feel they are regarded as a special individual. People like those who acknowledge them. It is not just about simple praise, but about genuinely recognizing the other person's value. Suppose someone presents a great idea in a meeting. At that moment, there's a person who says this: "That's a good idea, but there might be a better way." Although this may sound logical, the other person might feel that their idea is not being respected. But if you say it this way, it's different. This idea is really a good approach. If we expand on it further, we might see even greater results. It's the same content, but expressed in a way the other person can receive positively. People feel fondness for those who acknowledge them. If you want to persuade someone, you must first adopt an attitude of respect toward them. It is not about persuading, but about letting the other person choose for themselves. The most powerful form of persuasion is making the other person feel they decided on their own. If you give someone an order, they will feel resistance. Do it this way. But when you give them a choice, the story changes. There's this method and that method. Which one do you think would be more effective? By doing this, the other person believes they have taken the lead in making the decision. Dale Carnegie said, "Do not force, let them choose for themselves." When the other person feels they have the right to decide, persuasion works most effectively. The person who reads the other person's desires is the one who gets what they want. People seem to move logically, but in reality, they want to hear words that fulfill their desires. The core of persuasion is accurately identifying what the other person wants. It is important to avoid arguments, use their interests, and give them options. There is only one moment when everything becomes possible. It is when you fully understand the other person's desires. If you want to get what you want, you must first find out what they want. Do not refute, but acknowledge and then shift direction. A company was holding a staff meeting. One employee offered I think this is the best direction to take. Another employee immediately objected. That won't be effective. We should do it this way instead. The employee who proposed the idea froze up and stopped talking. The meeting proceeded in a chilly atmosphere. We can see situations like this anywhere. If you immediately refute the other person by saying they are wrong, you may be logically correct, but you have failed emotionally. When people lose an argument, instead of changing their mind, they often cling even more firmly to their position. Dale Carnegie said, "Do not try to defeat someone, but lead them to change their mind on their own." The more people feel cornered in an argument, the more strongly they fight back. When someone has a different opinion, most people start by refuting them in an attempt to persuade. That's wrong, no. This is right. But the moment you speak like this, the other person switches to fight mode. Not to hear a logical rebuttal, but to defend their own stance. Someone says, "I think this method is the best." If you refute them right away, they become defensive and stubbornly cling to their argument even more. But if you approach it like this, it's different. That method does have its good points, but if we go in this direction, it might be even more effective. By saying this, the other person does not become defensive and listens with an open mind. Even if you can win logically, if you inflict emotional harm, persuasion fails. It is important to acknowledge the other person's opinion first. When someone puts forward a certain argument, you may feel that it is wrong. But if you refute it immediately, the other person closes their ears. Dale Carnegie said, "If you want to persuade someone, first show that their opinion has value." For example, someone might say, "I think this method is the most effective." At that moment, instead of refuting them right away, it's better to approach it like this. That method has plenty of good aspects too, especially in these areas where it has advantages. If you first acknowledge the other person's opinion, they let down their guard and listen with an open mind. Then, when you carefully present a new direction, they feel inclined not to refute, but to consider it. To change direction, you have to make the other person think for themselves. People act best when they feel they chose on their own. The moment they sense coercion, they rebel. But if they believe they made the decision, they put it into action. For example, what if you said this to someone? "That method is ineffective. You have to do it this way." This statement is likely to provoke resistance. However, if you approach it like this, it's different. "This method is also good, but if we go in this direction, it might bring more advantages. What do you think?" If you guide the other person to think on their own, you can naturally change direction without forcing them. It is not about winning an argument, but about moving the other person. Even if you win an argument, that does not mean the other person will change their mind. All that remains is a sense of defeat. People are afraid to admit they are wrong. True persuasion is not about overwhelming or defeating someone with logic, but about guiding them to think in a new direction on their own. If you want to persuade someone, do not start by refuting them. First, acknowledge their opinion, and then gradually steer them in a different direction. Then they have no reason to refute, and they naturally come to accept what you say. What this means is clear. To persuade someone, you must touch their emotions before bringing out logic. Empathy comes before logic. Imagine you are advising someone to quit smoking. Cigarettes are harmful to health. They cause lung disease and heart problems, and they shorten your lifespan. This is not wrong, but will a smoker quit upon hearing this? However, if you say it like this, it's different. There was a man lying in a hospital bed. He wanted to say his final words to his son, but he couldn't finish speaking before he became short of breath in his last moments. He regretted it. "If only I had quit smoking back then." In that moment, people do not feel logic, but emotion. When emotion moves, behavior changes. People open their hearts to those who acknowledge their value. A man was working on his laptop in a coffee shop. He was preparing presentation materials to close an important deal. Then an elderly man sitting next to him looked at him and said, "It's nice to see you working so hard. People like you are the ones who succeed." The man paused for a moment, looked at the older gentleman, and felt good. People instinctively feel fondness for those who recognize their value. Everyone wants confirmation that they are an important being. Dale Carnegie said, "If you want to persuade a person, first make them feel that they are valuable. People like those who regard them as important. When you talk with someone, If they feel you genuinely care about what they are saying, they open their heart. Conversely, if they feel their existence is being belittled or ignored, that relationship breaks easily. Imagine a boss at a company saying this to an employee: "Finish this task quickly." It may be a simple instruction, but the employee might feel they are being treated like a machine. However, if you say it like this, it's different. "I trust that someone like you will do this job really well." Even if it's the same instruction, expressing it in a way that acknowledges the other person's value produces a completely different result. People are not simply persuaded by logic, they open up more easily when they feel they are an important presence. It is crucial to recognize the other person's real value. Empty flattery or insincere praise can backfire. People feel uncomfortable when they receive false praise. What truly matters is to genuinely see and acknowledge the other person's value. Suppose someone has just finished a good presentation. Instead of just saying, "You did well," you might say, "The materials you prepared were really impressive, especially how you concisely organized the main points. That stood out." Then the person feels their abilities have been specifically recognized. Genuine acknowledgement and concrete praise carry power beyond mere words. People open up when they feel they are special. Suppose someone says this: "I care a lot about people." Those words alone do not make the other person feel special. But if you say it like this, it's different. "It's rare to meet someone like you. I am really glad to have such an in-depth conversation." Hearing these words, the other person feels acknowledged as someone special and opens their heart even more. Everyone wants confirmation of their value. Those who understand this naturally gain others' trust. If you want to win someone's heart, first acknowledge their value. If you wish to win someone's heart, you need an attitude of respect for their existence before you try logical persuasion. It is not just simple praise, but recognizing and expressing the other person's true value. Dale Carnegie said, "People want their value to be acknowledged, and they never forget those who do so for them." When someone feels they are regarded as important, their heart naturally opens. So what is the first thing you should do when you need to persuade someone? Not logic, but acknowledging the other person's value. Dale Carnegie said, "People follow those who affirm their importance. Rather than speaking what is logically correct, it is far more powerful to provide the emotion the other person wants to feel." People who are good at persuasion deal with emotions, not logic. People think they make logical decisions, but in reality, emotion leads the way. Therefore, those who excel at persuasion first figure out what the other person wants to feel, rather than listing data. Sales experts talk first about how a product will make you feel when you use it, rather than just explaining its features. Instead of saying, "This sofa is ergonomically designed and comfortable," they say, "When you sit on this sofa, the fatigue built up all day melts away, and you can enjoy a warm cup of coffee in total relaxation." This has a much stronger impact. Actions speak louder than words. A famous speaker took the stage. He did not say a single word and slowly looked over the audience. After a few seconds, people began to focus more and more. And when he finally opened his mouth to speak, everyone was drawn in. Was it because he said something extraordinary? No. It was because his demeanor had already persuaded them. Dale Carnegie said, "People do not remember what you said, but they remember how you made them feel for a long time." Persuasion is not achieved by words alone. Something far more powerful than words is your attitude. People read more information from your attitude than from your words. Imagine someone saying this: "I trust you." But if they avoid eye contact, speak without confidence in their voice, and wear an awkward expression, it is hard to believe them. On the other hand, even if they do not say anything, if they show a warm smile and confident gaze, the other person feels trust. Genuine trust comes not from logical explanations, but from attitude. People who are persuasive pay attention to their gestures and expressions. For example, let's say a leader tells their employees, "We will definitely make this project a success." But if they cross their arms, lower their head, and avoid eye contact, no one will believe what they say. However, if they look people in the eye with a steady gaze, straighten their shoulders, and use gestures while speaking, those who listen come to trust their words. There are times when silence and composure are even more powerful. Many people think they have to talk a lot, but sometimes silence conveys a stronger message. When someone comes at you aggressively in a debate, instead of immediately refuting them, it can be more powerful to quietly look at them and wait. The other person becomes tense and uneasy, reevaluating the weight of their own words. A composed attitude is power. A confident person does not waste words, and that composure can be more effective in persuasion. People remember not so much what you said, but how you said it. When someone recalls your words, they do not remember each individual word, but the atmosphere you created. Words from a person who exudes confidence carry strong persuasive power. Conversely, it's hard to trust words from someone who seems anxious. Dale Carnegie said, "People do not follow your words, but the feeling you give them." If you want to persuade, change your attitude before your words. Do not persuade, instead guide the other person to choose on their own. One day, a merchant was selling goods in a market. He spoke to a passing customer. "You definitely need this item. You'll regret it if you don't buy it now." But the customer shook their head and walked on. In the same market, there was another merchant. He smiled at the customer and said, "Please try touching this item yourself. Once you hold it in your hand, it'll feel different." The customer casually picked it up and naturally became interested. Eventually, they opened their wallet. Both merchants sold the same item, but one used pressure while the other gave the customer a choice. The results were different. Dale Carnegie said, "If you want to move someone, do not force them. Instead, make them feel they chose on their own." People act when they believe they made the choice themselves. What if you said this to someone? "You have to do it this way." The moment they hear this, resistance arises in their mind. But if you say it like this, it's different. There's this method and that method. Which one do you think is better? Even if you're leading them in the same direction, they'll follow without resistance. People want to protect their freedom. The moment they feel someone is forcing them, they instinctively resist. But if you give them a choice, they move on their own. Providing the emotion the other person wants is the essence of persuasion. The person who moves emotions moves the world. The core of persuasion is not logic, but emotion. People believe they think logically, but in reality, they move according to their emotions. Persuasion truly begins when you understand what emotions the other person feels, and deliver your message in a way that matches those emotions. Even if what you say is logically perfect, that does not mean the other person will accept it. What matters is reading the other person's emotions and moving them. So when you need to persuade someone, where should your focus be? not on logic, but on emotion. We usually think if we speak a truth, the other person will accept it. But Dale Carnegie said, people only believe what they want to believe. What do you think?